is Melina León. I'm a filmmaker from Peru, and we're here to discuss art as translation, which is a topic that is all the time in my practice, and I think we have that in common with Pauchi Sasaki, a musician that collaborates very often with me all the time. We're very good friends, and our new good friend Phan, who actually is the person who started the conversation. So if you can introduce yourself.
Sure. Well, Pauchi, why don't you introduce yourself first?
Okay. My name is Pauchi Sasaki, and I am a composer, and I am also a fellow here at the Institute of Ideas and Imagination. I am a composer that works with film a lot, but also I do multimedia projects, interdisciplinary projects, mixing different disciplines in one complex project, more elaborated projects. And yes, I am very happy to join you guys in this conversation.
And I'm Phan. I'm an assistant professor in Vietnamese linguistics and intellectual history at Columbia University, also a fellow here. And as Melina mentioned, we've sort of discovered a topic in common involving artistic collaboration and the notion of that collaboration as a kind of translation. So I work on translation from literary Sinitic or classical Chinese into vernacular Vietnamese particularly. And I've been exploring sort of the task of taking content and form in one sort of space and then transposing it into another. And we discovered that the artistic process has something similar. There's something fundamentally similar between the practice of translation and the practice of artistic production or collaboration. So, in an earlier conversation, we posed the question, how do artists collaborate? How do artists take one vision or one form or one piece of content and produce it in another form or another structure? Or take an idea that is expressed in one medium and expressed in another, or take an idea and use multiple forms to produce it, such as occurs in film. And we wanted to have a conversation about how that might be a kind of art as translation. So maybe we can begin with the collaboration between Pauchi and Melina on your recent film.
Mm-hmm. Well, I did the music for Melina's film, Canción Sin Nombre, and if we focus on that artistic process, it was very demanding and complex creative process, because it was difficult for me to figure out what was going to be scored. No, like what I had to translate, what was important to underline with music. No, was there a message or an idea or an emotion that needed music to be more powerful? So I tried different perspectives, and it was very interesting because it was very clear when something didn't fit into the aesthetic and the drama of the film, until so you try and you try and you try, and then you finally get what was needed to be highlighted. And in this case, I found out that it was the humanity of the character Georgina. I realized that the movie was, in essence, the fight, the human right, the right to love. Mm-hmm. This character, who someone stole the baby, somebody took away her right to love, to be a mother, to feel love. And then you have dialogues, very strong dialogues from a politician, I think, where he says, well, be happy because where your baby is now, maybe he will have better conditions. And that's not the topic. The topic is that she has the right to love. So I wanted to score that, no, like she was this very like delicate, but at the same time strong person, no. But I wanted to score her sensitivity, not only her love, no, but her how she contemplated this moment also, no. The music is not dramatic. Yes.
Yeah, I mean, that's very interesting. So actually it reminds me of something you said earlier today about Dracula. Well, about how Philip Glass chose to score the love story in that film. So, you know, I guess one question we could ask is, in a collaboration like between you and Melina and Pauchi, you know, in expressing this story, how do you make the choice to what goes into the decisions about what to express here or there, depending on the visuals or the music? You know, like why is it that Philip Glass is going to score the love story, but there's so much horrific imagery in Dracula? So there's a lot of painful imagery, you know, in this film. There's a lot of imagery of distance, really, like all these vacant spaces in the film. So I guess, you know, if you have you have all these different dimensions of signaling to the viewer something. How do you decide that that you know, which part will carry what load, I guess, is the question. Do you know what I mean? Yeah.
Yeah. To me, it's a revelation, the whole thing. Like how Pauchi managed to put into words in such a small phrase, the right to love. Like I never told her that. So this is translation. Like, okay, I offer you this, but you bring this vision, no? And you complete it, no? So the decision is constant, no? It's a movement. It's like I present you something, you're gonna bring something, like the things you're telling, and what you're feeling, even no, what happened to you, no? Something has happened because you just saw the film, no?
Yeah.
And you're bringing that, no? And we're carrying this, no? And it is completing the process, no? Because what you're feeling. Otherwise, can you imagine? We do all this and nobody responds.
Yeah.
So it's total translation, no? And because we trust each other, because we know each other for a long time, I think it was pretty much she took the film and worked on it and suggested things, and we were in a lot of silence, no, for some time, wondering, no, just trying to feel if it's good or not, no, if it's suitable. Maybe good is not the word, no, maybe if it convinces us, fits or not. No?
Mm-hmm.
And then this story happened where she went through a lot to find an amazing violin, the guy from New York, he was playing the cello. An amazing cello player she found and recorded with him. It was a great effort. And the music she had composed, it was terribly beautiful. But then, and we used it for a long time, and then we realized it's wrong. And the only thing you can do when this happens is to take out without complaining. Mm-hmm. It has to be without complaining, because this is the job, this is the work, and it's all the time like that. We film, we work with our directors and make them build things, and then in a second you have to say this is not working. And
I remember you telling me about this sort of the earlier score that was more melodic, right? And it sort of it clashed with the power of the actors. Is that what you said?
Yes.
Something like it was too much somehow.
It felt like the music was patronizing. It was very strange. This is the very first time that happened to me. I have more than 30 films scored, and this is the very first time that the music felt like it was saying, "Oh, I'm so sorry for you," kind of. And I was like, no, this is about dignity, no? And this has to come out from the character with in a very organic way. No, not somebody telling me what is looking in the story. Is about the character herself emanating an energy. No, I wanted to amplify her energy, no, her love.
Yeah, I mean, it's very clear in the finished product. I was just saying to Melina before this, the centering of the human story is very powerful. But you know what you say now, so the process that is very interesting to me is the process by which you identify that. You said, okay, this is patronizing, or this is now working somehow. And it reminds me, if you remember, it reminds me of the moment of translation that I shared with you earlier about the mulberries. And we talked briefly about the moving target of translation. So something that I'm very curious about with the artistic process is when and how you identify the thing you want to express. Because the right to love, the dignity of the story, these are things that somehow emerged in that process, right? So in the poem I work on, you know, the translator saw this allusion to a song about loyalty, but what emerged for them in that was an image of distance, was an image of being so far separated. So they took a piece from the original and reproduced it into this in this completely different way to express it, to express distance instead. And I know it's hard to talk about that without the poem in front of us, but the point is the target of translation moved somehow. It's still part of what was in the original, but it evolved. So I guess, you know, it sounds to me like there's something about, you know, chasing the thing, you know, that you want to express, and it's not designed. So can maybe both of you talk a bit about how you chase the thing? You know, how do you?
In film happens a lot that the target changes because it has so many stages. Pre-production, development, pre-production, the script, then the shooting, then you go to edit, and in each stage the movie changes. No, that happens, no?
Yeah, we use words. We use words, like he's saying, the right to love. She found these words, so it's not just sounds and images, as we are always saying. No?
Yeah.
And with the director of photography, we have the word phantom. We wanted to speak about how is it like to be a phantom, and consciously we were trying to find an answer. And we failed miserably, like we talk and blah blah blah. And you know, it's just phantom was good enough to provoke the feeling of hunting for that image, but it wasn't good enough for us to imagine how to express phantom. It had to be reality to tell us what is it like to be. Actually, we had a little discussion. He said, "They're not phantoms. They're like you and me. They were not phantoms." And we said, "Oh yeah, they are made phantoms." That's as far as we got in the conversation, and then we couldn't design it, draw it, plan it, and it was just us being there in the desert with the actors at night, because they have to come back at home at night, and there's no lights, and we couldn't see anything in the camera because we didn't want to make a big film with bringing big lights, with like restriction, and in the restriction we remember, or the director of photography remember, there is a way to make the camera, to force the camera up to the to get the maximum, to the limit, to make it play, record at 3 frames per second. That's like a maximum that it can take light. And he said, but they are gonna look like phantoms.
Is this the sequence where they flicker?
Exactly.
That's that sequence, yeah.
Yeah, exactly, okay. And that's our favorite. That's what we were hunting for, But we couldn't think about that. It's just a desire.
Yeah.
And you have to. I think our job, if it was any good, it was to want it, to want this, and we receive it from experience, from technology, from, and I think from also applying that bit of restriction. Silence, make a big fuss for shooting, bring all these elements that have nothing to do with the story you're telling.
Right.
Maybe do it, but for something that's more related. But in these conditions of poverty, these conditions of marginalization and just chaos, to bring such a technical operation, big technical operation, would have been a mistake. And I think in the end, it gave us something.
And then, if I understand you correctly, then the vision of the story you wanted to tell, or the vision of the film, changes as a result. Is that right? Yeah. I mean, that's kind of the thing that I'm chasing. It reminds, anyway, that's a different topic. Like, so in a sense, you might not know, you don't know always the thing that you will produce or create, right? You have an idea, and the manifestation of it changes its eventual outcome. I mean, I think that is a kind of translation. So, like what a translation is. It's different, obviously, because you're working with an original material. So there is already a finished product, But the translator, when they sit down with that product, they render and they render and they render. And in the rendering, they re-understand. They understand multiple times what the original thing is saying, at least to them. Not ontologically, not objectively, but subjectively to them. The thing that they are able to understand of that text changes as they render it this way or that way or this way or that way. And what happens is then the thing that moved them the most in a line or in the entire story or in an image emerges, and that is the thing that they take and they make the center of their version of the original text. And for Walter Benjamin, that process is a development towards a kind of higher language, like a pure, for him, a religious kind of truth. But I wonder if you find in collaboration with each other, how would you describe that path towards the thing that you ultimately produce? I don't know, this question is not clear, but do you see what I'm saying?
Yes.
Yeah.
So I think you mentioned about how in the process of translation everything has to go through subjectivity, and in that sense we are a filter and then there is a filtering process, and then also there is a resonance process.
Resonance.
No?
Mm-hmm.
So, for example, if we decide to collaborate, we have to feel like we will resonate, something will resonate between us,
Mm-hmm.
no? Because sometimes one concept doesn't mean, or it is not understood in the same way in different by Melina or by me, no? So we have to be sure that we are talking about the same thing, and I think that's something that comes in the moment when you choose your collaborator, no?
Mm.
And because then all the responsibility is in the filter. No, the original work doesn't have any power anymore,
Yeah.
and the power moves to the subjectivity of the translator. So you have to trust that filter.
Mm-hmm.
No, so when I choose collaborators, for me, I take a long time, like just to feel how they perceive things, if we will be able to understand each other in our language without words, no? So for me, it's something like that. I don't know, you, Melina.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, in film you can see the main text is probably the script, no?
Mm-hmm.
Sure.
But we know the script is dead. We call it that is dead, is in the sense that it's just 80 pages, you know, with the words there that yes can be powerful because of the structure and this and descriptions and this is the origin of something, but it's not the thing. You can have a great script and ruin it.
Yeah.
Right?
And you could have a collaborator that you have worked with before, that you have resonated with before, but I assume that in any given project, even with a trusted partner, you're looking for the point where you guys reverberate with each other about that project.
Yeah.
Yeah, that is what Walter Benjamin said. You know, between two languages, that's what you're looking for. You're looking for the points at which your world, your language reverberates with the world of the language of the original. And that's the point of contact for that affords the possibility of a translation. Mm-hmm. So it sounds to me like that is what affords the possibility of an artistic collaboration.
Yeah, that was the case with actors too. No? That was the case with actors. Georgina, Pamela Mendoza Arti understood very well. No? You were just asking me about her, why did I work with her? She was not a professional actor. No? It was the first time in front of a camera. No?
Amazing.
But she understood better than me the story. So how could I not work with her if she knows better in her body? No? Again, the body. No, this is why we resonate, because I think the importance of the body. No, she knows in her body what it means to be so. In such a fragile condition since you are born. No? She was the daughter of a street seller in the worst time of one of the poorest countries in the world. No? And she grew up inside this little thing that her mother was using to sell candies in the streets of Lima. And it has the thing has a table to sell the candies. And inside there is a hall, so she would nap there when she was a baby until 3 years old. You know? And then the police, because they are not allowed in any street, and they wanted to go to certain avenue in Lima because there's more traffic there, no? And because there's more traffic of people and stuff, the police want to take them out. No? He's a big enemy, the street seller. So this is something in your face, in your memory, in your body that I haven't experienced. And she was saying, no, it's different. No? You understand it, you empathize, but you haven't felt it. So I thought, no, you tell me. I kind of understand, but you're gonna tell me, and I will show it.
Yeah, that's remarkable. I mean, going back to your comments earlier in the day, at off-camera comments, but you know, at the same time, you clearly recognized, like there's a key to recognizing the thing in someone else who understands it better than you. I mean, there's something going on there, and also the same thing, recognizing when Pauchi brings the concept of the right to love, the recognition that there's a harmony, there's a chime that goes off, right? That's the right thing. And it reminds me of exactly what you mentioned just now, Melina. Pauchi, your comments earlier today about empathy, about like an experience. Like you can say a thing in language, but if you haven't experienced it, you know, your meaning when you say that thing is not the same thing, right? So the closest we get is empathy, and the miracle of artistic work is to sort of trigger a kind of empathetic sharing. But like, and I don't know if this is too this might be too crazy sounding, but you know, like
this we love.
But it sounds to me like you know, when you talk about reverberating or finding a collaborator that you can work with, that you will resonate with, like in some ways you have to have that basic level, right? You have to somehow, there's like an empathetic frequency. If the object is like, if there's you and then there's me and then there's another person and then there's a thing that we're all trying to grasp at, you know, that thing is impossible to touch together. But tell me if I'm wrong about this, but like it sounds like in chasing after that thing, you forge an empathetic relationship with each other, and that's the way in which you're able to decide whether something is working or not with regard to that object. Is that right? Because this is very different than translation, where the translator is not in an active partnership. They are free to do whatever they are free to basically reflect on they're looking in, the text is a mirror for them, but it's not, doesn't speak back, you know? But in a live collaboration, does that make, yeah.
Yes. So I think that in this kind of projects, there is a moment that the piece has its own life.
Yeah.
And it becomes like a baby that you have to feed, no? And everybody's looking at the baby and saying, okay, no, he needs this, she needs that, no, but so we are all like super concentrated on how to have the best future for this being, no? And that's is very strange, but there is also a sensation in my experience that it almost feels like the work doesn't belong to you. No, you have to serve the purpose of that being, no, and this being express itself in its full potential. No? I don't know if you feel like that.
Yeah, totally.
Completely.
Yeah. I mean, after such a long process of making the film, I thought at some point I was being, it was the boss, no? I felt at some point it went too far, no? It went too far, and my entire life was just feeding this baby, no? And I wanted so badly to have a life. But then this is another aspect that's beautiful about collaboration, no? Because all the other parents of the baby help you, no?
Yeah.
Help you to come out of this feeling of oppression.
Oh, I see.
Yes.
Yeah. But you also have to...
because on top of things, the movie is oppressive, no? So, yes. Totally, I agree with that. And Inti shared that when he was finishing the post-production of Image in Brazil with a very good person named Fabinho, no? Like, he is like he's an artist, no? And does this final process for the final image, no? It's called color correction, but since it's not color image correction, And Inti mentioned, well, I just saw the film and I had that experience of not knowing who made that movie. Yes, he shared that with me. Yeah, it's weird.
But in that partner, in raising the baby together, you have to have some kind of understanding of each other, right? Otherwise, we're belaboring the metaphor, but like divorce, right? Like, there's got to be some simpatico something, right?
Yeah.
I guess what I'm really driving at, and maybe this is a good time to I had another question that I wanted to ask both of you, and this might be a bridge for that question. What I'm driving at is like, it seems a deep mystery to me how any single artist, much less a team of artists, work together to express anything, anything, any truth, whatever word you want to say, like how do they arrive at that? And the thing that sparked the idea of this chat was the idea that, that process by which a translator renders and renders and renders is a kind of chasing a moving target. And it seems like, there's now in artistic collaboration but also several people chasing that moving target. And that must rely on some kind of empathy between you, and of course between you and the thing that you're chasing. So it's like a multi-dimensional empathy. And then magically what you produce is a thing that catalyzes empathy in the viewer, Go ahead.
Yeah, that doesn't happen all the time, no? In the world of cinema, no? In big productions, sometimes it is just a job, no? But there are certain projects that you have the luck to work with people that you connect with, which is the ideal, no?
Right.
But sometimes what you're describing is like the ideal situation, no? The most artistic situation possible, no? And we were lucky that for Melina's film we had that, no? But there are so many other productions that they just do their job, no?
Right.
They don't
Sure.
get the creators. They don't get into this connection and process of knowing each other and resonate. No, sometimes it takes longer. And for example, I met Melina in 2006 and the movie was released 2019, so you can count there 13 years that she was telling me the story. She had already the story. So and it took many years to make that film a reality, no? But so little by little, also time is very important, no? When the information sinks and you have time to see things from other perspective, no? And also big emotions are complex. So if you don't do that kind of portraying of big emotions with time, sometimes you just end up doing kind of cartoon of something.
Yeah.
So that's something that also is for me, in my personal experience, is nice when you have the time to process and to revisit before you say this is the final version.
Yeah, and speaking of translations, like we shouldn't forget the fact that the script was written with Michael White, a friend from St. Louis.
Oh.
From the U.S.
Oh, okay.
Yes. Yeah. And I thought that was fantastic, but it made the process longer because he was seeing in these Peruvian Indian characters, immigrants, he was seeing Irish immigrants in the U.S. Like, I don't know how many centuries ago. That was his
point of reverberation.
That was his point of reverberation, exactly. And I was like, oh, interesting. Like the first drafts, he was coming up with these scenes where that I could not really feel belong to Peru, but they had some truth.
Right.
but it was the Irish truth.
That's what I mean, yeah. And recognizing some kind of truth, but a different truth. And like finding the point of reverberation that is on the thing that you want. You know, that process is a little,
Yeah.
That's fascinating. And back to your point about work, of course this is a little bit of a mundane example, but certainly that is the same thing with translation. You know, like it's what Walter Benjamin calls being a slave to the content. You know, there's much translation that is simply the work of transmitting the message. But what he considers true translation is what you've described as the ideal artistic collaboration, this other thing. So can I switch the topic a little bit? So back to something that seems very harmonious between the score and the film, the visuals of the film and the pacing of the film is a kind of, to use your word from this morning, Pauchi, a kind of sensation. It's an unfolding of sensation after sensation after sensation. There is clearly a story. There's even a little bit of a mystery. You know, there's definitely a story in that way, but for me as a viewer, it was a story told in a sequence of sensations, you know. And I really wanted to ask both of you about that because the score itself seems to be not, I don't know the right word, not sub-emotional, but the atoms of emotion, you know, not emotions themselves, but then the result is emotional. And the same with the visuality, you know, like there's almost you don't know why it makes you feel what you're feeling, and because it's almost like a chemical response. So it seems to be something that you two have in common. And I want to, if you don't mind, can I share this poem? Because this is the poem I mentioned earlier that gets at that idea of sensation. I'm just curious what your response is to it. So this is a poem, very well-known poem for East Asianists by a poet named Tao Yanming, who's writing in the first half of the first millennium. I think it's 5th century. Oh God, I shouldn't say that on film. I should know, but I forgot. He's the 6 Dynasties poet. And this poem is called, it's number 5 of 20 poems on drinking wine. But this is this is my translation of the poem. So I build my hut in the realm of men, yet hear no noise of horse or cart. How is this done, you ask? With a distant heart it is naturally so. And this is the main part. Picking chrysanthemums by the eastern hedge, distantly I glimpse South Mountain. The mountain air is fine at dusk, and flying birds return home together. In this there is some true idea. I would like to define it, but have lost the words. So the main point is, that was a terrible recitation, but the main point is the poem primarily is rendering a single instant, and it does not name the emotion. You couldn't name it in a sophisticated emotional way. You couldn't say it's heartbreak. You couldn't say it's sadness. You couldn't say it's joy. But as you kept on saying, you have a feeling. You know, you have a sensation. And then in the last line, he says, I kind of want to understand it. I know there's something true, but I can't actually articulate it. I can't explain it. So I felt that many times watching this film. But then the result, of course, was this tapestry of heartbreak, of suffering. But I wonder what is your process of breaking down a story as complex as this into what, at least for me, was a series of sensations like that?
What happens is that's how I think is the organic way to feel things, no? You don't feel something and say, I'm experiencing sadness. I experience it, no, you know? So we are not encapsulating emotions in real time. We, in the future, we say, oh, this has happened, no? But in the moment when you experience something, it's like, oh, a sensation, no? You know, it's like more like a sensation, and then you can, when you process, you can put a name, no?
Yeah.
So I think that the movie works because it has that, no? That organic way we perceive things. It's not like something terrible happens to you, and then you are going through these big emotions, big feelings, and you are at the same time putting names. No.
Yeah.
So it is. The feelings are in real time. They are experienced as sensations.
Yeah.
No.
And then how do you know? I mean, as with your choice to reject the original melodic score, how do you know that what you've broken down will produce the sensation that will then produce the emotion for the viewer? You know what I mean? Like that seems very mysterious to me.
What happened with the music? It didn't have to be that direct, because the first one was very direct, and it was pushy. The movie asked for a lot of air, of silences, a lot of space needed, because of the rhythm, because of the encuadres, the shots, no. So the music needed to breathe with that, no. So, for example, something that happened at the beginning, the first score was made for a cut of 4 hours and a half. So there was not clear breathing there. So by the time the movie became 2 hours or then less, so it was more clear. Oh, we are breathing like this. Okay, let's go with this. It has an organic, no. So this is a process, no, that you have to wait, no, until things starts to speak to each other, no? Yeah, it was not possible at the beginning, the communication, because still was in process, no. But that's why I don't like to close to give early statements of things, no.
Because they'll change.
They will change, no. Like I imagine you also, when you get into a process with a poem, no, you need time to let it sink, no.
Yeah. Yeah, that's definitely true. You know, first drafts are, I mean, they're a different poem.
Yes.
Yeah. To me, about the sensation, the first sensation is to see the face of the actor.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's, to me, it's like that's the movie. I already have a movie when I feel this is the character. When I saw Pamela in a Facebook photo, I thought, okay, we're starting to make a film.
Yeah.
And then Tommy also, no? I already knew Tommy had what I needed for Pedro, no? But he did a terrible casting, a terrible sensation he provoked in the casting, but I only understood later, no? It's part of everything, no? And it became terribly clear for me he was good for the part when I actually brought another collaborator, Bruno Dar, a very, very good actor from Peru. I asked him to give some workshop to them, no? And he asked him to improvise, and he pushed him in real time to be in an uncomfortable sort of sexual situation. And that moment with Bruno, Bruno pushing, because I don't like pushing people, or pushing anything. No, I think we share that in common. You were also asking, no, what is there in common? No, I think we really like, and we talk about this, no, how we enjoy collaboration with people who are open. To what's happening in front of them, no? The observation, the deep listening, no? For new things, no? or sensations, no? That are maybe I would say it's like a complex emotion, like she's describing, no? That you're heartbroken, but you're very happy too, and sometimes, and this is more like life than just one thing.
Yeah. I mean, it's fascinating. I mean, I think it's really fascinating to hear how the two of you, I don't have the right language, which is not surprising because this is something that seems extra linguistic, but, are reaching towards something and somehow with each other, are able to, in a concerted way, follow something that emerges, I think that's the main difference, I would say, between a solitary translator and what you're describing, because there's so much that's in common. There's something about the evolution of the content, the moving target of the expression. There's something about seeing something in form, as you were saying earlier, seeing an essence or a sensation in a form and then reacting to it and then reproducing a different form for it until many forms later something has emerged. That sounds very similar, and this thing that we're talking about with regard to empathy or reverberation or understanding, points of contact, that there's better language for it, but that sounds to me like it's describing a deep mystery. I think that's the same. But of course, the difference is the translator is in conversation with a silent partner, and you're not. Yeah.
And there are not experiences of collaborative translations?
There are.
How that works?
Well, I've never done it. So I don't know if I could. That is an excellent question. So there are, in fact, most of the professional translations that we have are often team products. There is most of the short stories from the early 20th century in Vietnam are produced by a Hanoi translation board, which is a team of translators. But this is a different case because I think in this case, the common ground that is off there is an elevation of the message. There is an idea of faithfulness that is then I think elevated. And this is a different kind of translation because that team can agree on trying to be faithful to something. Whether it's actually faithful or not, that is the kind of, I don't know if propagandistic is the right word, but that's the kind of agreed upon project. Mm-hmm. And I think that is less like the process you're describing than the process that goes on in an individual translator, because the individual translator is not beholden to, at least in the type that I'm studying, beholden to faithfulness to the content. They're trying to understand something by reverberating with a piece of work that already exists. Mm-hmm. So that sounds more like what you're describing, because then something new is produced. Mm-hmm. Something new is produced out of that is discovered through that process. And that sounds to me more like what you two are doing. But I should also say I'm not a professional translator at all. I translate these things for my class. So, it's like me in like the equivalent of a bathroom.
Okay.
Yeah, anyway, that's fascinating.
Yeah, well, you're not a professional translator, but you study that, specifically the translation of classic Chinese to vernacular Vietnamese, which is a sort of huge study on translation.
Yeah, that's the current project, is about that that process, and I really appreciate this conversation because as I said in the very beginning of coming here to Reed Hall, there is something that you cannot. There is a limit to what you can understand about that process. But then, hearing you, each of you speak, and then reading and experiencing your work, it was a kind of revelation. I was like, wow, this is a process that is ongoing and living. And not only that, but it is a major primal process of humans, which is, I'm increasingly convinced the production of art is exactly the same thing. Melina, your name for this chat, art as translation, I think is exactly correct. There's something just fundamental about the production of art that has to do with mutual interpretation or mutual reverberation or a mutual chasing of something, and that is what the task of the translator is. Mm-hmm. So, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. So
Thank
beautiful.
you.
Thank you for giving us the words.
Yes.
That we lack.
It was such
so
a pleasure.
Important.
Yeah. Hooray!